Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next edition of CNF Talks. It's my pleasure today to have with me Matt Townsend, who's a partner and global co-head of the Environmental, Climate and Regulatory Law Group at A&O Sherman. Matt's going to be speaking at our forthcoming event, Making the UK a Global Hub for Transition Finance, which is being held in central London on the 10th of October. Matt, welcome.
Thank you, Morris.
Let's turn to our first question, if we may. What are the key challenges and opportunities for the UK in becoming a global hub for transition finance?
Well, I think let's start with the opportunities. I mean, I think they are very, very significant if the UK gets this right. And we're
Yeah.
seeing many of the global capital markets around the world shaping up to try and act as hubs, generators, and centers of excellence when it comes to sustainable finance. I think it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, though. So, who's going to win that race ultimately will depend upon who manages to put the pieces together in the most coherent way possible. And this is something we'll examine in the conference in October, that there's many strands that go into this to make London or New York or wherever it may be a centre of excellence and a massive generator of innovation. I mean, that's really what it's got to drive, is innovation in the finance market, and also from a regulatory policy perspective, is making sure that the UK has a robust market that folk have confidence in, particularly given concerns around things like greenwashing, and that investors want to come to for a whole host of different reasons, primarily because of ease of doing business and the level of understanding and sophistication in the market when it comes to some of these issues.
Okay. And in terms of the challenges are simply trying to get all of that in place and beating, or at least offering a superior hub to those, say, that Singapore or New York might be trying to offer to people now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the key challenges are touched upon is getting all the pieces together. So
Yeah.
if you actually take a step back and look at this about what makes a market and a capital market in that function most effectively, and that's a lot of confidence. It's making
Yeah.
sure there's suitable regulatory, supervisory guardrails in there. It's measures around, as I say, around greenwashing. It's making
Yeah.
sure that regulators understand the issues and, however, are flexible and pragmatic, because we are, rolling many of these measures out for the first time. So there's an awful lot of kind of regulatory change hitting the market participants. So I think it's a question of getting all those aligned. So you can, and each of those in and of themselves are quite substantive pieces. So look at the work around taxonomies, look at the work that's required around anti-greenwashing measures, look at the work around product labeling and classification. I mean, they're just kind of 3 or 4 examples, all substantive. You've got to get all those right in order to make the markets function. And also, let's not forget here that historically London has succeeded because it struck the right balance between regulation and then letting the market do its job. And there is a danger if you over-regulate, you stifle market innovation. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that, because we need the market here in London to do its job, which is to innovate, as I keep talking about. And so that's where the guardrails are so critical. So when people talk about, here's my new, innovative, sustainable derivative instrument, great. Okay, take that to the market and do your job. But we've got to have confidence that what does that mean? What is sustainable in that context, etc. So building all that out, ASAP, as it were, because obviously everybody's champing at the bit for this, I think is the central challenge.
Yeah, and there seems to be some sort of confusion about definitions and what transition finance, how you define it. And there's certainly a need, is there not, for guiding principles and standards. Is that the starting point for the work that's being done?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly one of the key starting points.
Mm,
I mean, we have, if we look back over the last couple of decades, there's a lot of terminology out there around environmental climate. Well, people really weren't talking
mm,
about transition 10 years ago.
yeah.
And nobody's ever properly defined any of this stuff. I mean, it's
Mm,
largely been a contractual definition exercise for people like me and my fellow practitioners in the market.
yeah.
Trying to put some definitional framework around, what is a transition activity, what is
Mm,
climate mitigation, what is climate adaptation, and how do you classify certain economic activities within all of that is
mm,
absolutely a fundamental pillar. But
yeah.
again,
Yeah.
let's keep this nimble. Let's keep the regulation flexible. Let's not overcook it.
Mm,
But you're absolutely right that that's a real kind of part of it, and because that also instills confidence. So when investors are coming
yes.
to the market and equities are being labelled as as having a kind of climate transition or a climate adaptation
Mm,
characteristic to them, then we all know what that means, and that has to be
yeah.
to everybody's benefit in lots
Yes.
of different
Yeah.
ways. So that's absolutely right.
And how can market tools like carbon markets, insurance, and private capital be leveraged to unlock private finance for nascent technologies and solutions? I suppose what do you see as the principal market tools that are available here?
Yes, I mean there are a number, I think, of principal market tools here. I mean, one is clearly in the finance instruments and structures that can be brought and developed in the market. So, I
Yeah.
mean, just look at what we've seen in the bond space. Well, actually, for the last 10 years, sustainability
Mm,
loans,
yeah.
back loans, etc. So there's probably what you'd regard as fairly mainstream instruments now, but there's a kind of leap that I think some of those instruments can take. You've then
Mm,
got certain other parts of the overall kind of market in the very broadest sense, like
mm,
carbon markets, which I know
yeah.
are not liked by everyone, but
Mm,
if structured correctly, they are and can be an accelerant of getting capital into developing countries
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for transition and mitigation projects, and generate capital in and of themselves. So I
Mm,
think those, I mean, there's some way to go, particularly around the voluntary markets in that space. My
yeah.
fear on that, just on the carbon piece, just for a moment in particular, is governments may turn to more direct forms of taxation rather than more market-based instruments. So, e.g.,
Yes.
Europe's carbon border adjustment mechanism, classic example.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why I think we need to see carbon markets really shape up and get their governance frameworks in
Mm,
place in the voluntary space.
mm,
So I think that's very much part of it. You touch on insurance and other kind of instruments.
mm,
Absolutely right. I mean, I think they
mm,
all have a role in the kind of ecosystem, and that's
yeah.
why I think you can't just look at one of these in isolation and say, oh, you know what? If we get this right, it's going to be a
Mm,
transformational kind of accelerant in this
yeah.
space. You've got to get the individual strands aligned,
Mm,
and that takes all sectors. So when we think about the fundamental question here about how do you transform London into that hub,
mm,
in
mm,
addition to all of that, let's also not lose sight of the need for skills and capacity building. I mean, there's
yes.
lots of that's a big element of it, making
Mm,
London at the forefront globally of the
mm,
skills required to aid this transformation. I think is a real element of it.
mm. Do you think that London is better positioned in terms of those skills than some of the other centres, and given the background of what we've done in the city and elsewhere in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, I may be biased, conscious or otherwise. I'm
Yeah.
not quite sure, but anyway, I may be biased in
Mm,
that. But look, just trying to look at this objectively. I mean, I think London is very well placed.
mm,
I mean, historically, there's been an awful lot of market innovation here
yeah.
in London. You have a significant centres of expertise across legal, across insurance, obviously across
Mm,
finance. So I think you've
yeah.
got I think you've got the people actually. It's just a question of helping, I think, accelerate the learnings, and we see it. I see this with clients every day. the level
Yeah.
of tooling up recruitment in the space, setting up new teams that we would have only kind of dreamt about 5 years ago
Mm,
is really very
mm,
significant. So I think there's an awful lot of activity going on, and that's really really important. So I do think London, as compared to certain other capital markets, I think has a real advantage that we
yeah.
need to utilise it.
Yeah. Finally, Matt, in the interest of time, what do you see as the role of government? You refer to markets being should be left free to innovate. Uh, what can government do to be supportive of this ambition for it to become a global hub for transition finance? How can it help this development?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key point there, Morris, is around kind of signalling, regulatory signalling.
Mm,
So, um, investors in the market, developers of the market, and regulators to in many ways like to know the direction of travel from a regulatory
yeah.
perspective. So let's make sure government is giving the right signals that this is the direction of travel. Obviously, we've got new Labour government in place,
Mm,
which is starting to signal more clearly, I think, the pathway. I think the
mm,
second point, as part of that signalling, is an indication that government is highly supportive of what the city is trying to do here and is a
yes.
facilitator.
Mm,
And is engaged with industry bodies and regulators when it comes to
mm,
market design. So it can't be done in
mm,
isolation. You need everybody around the table to make sure that the design instruments, whether that's the taxonomy, whether it's anti-greenwashing measures, whether
yeah.
it's the rule book for sustainability-linked bonds, etc., that's really really tuned regulation,
Mm,
and that requires government to listen,
mm,
and to recognise that if we get it wrong and we over-regulate,
mm.
you will stifle innovation. So everybody talks about
Absolutely.
the finance gap here between where we are now and the level of finance needed to scale up.
Mm,
Um,
mm.
we get this wrong, and we will slow it all down. So it's a surgical. I'd sum it up, say it's a surgical signalling and facilitative role to get this right.
Mm, mm. Well, let's hope all the parts come together in the way that you described, Matt. For our viewers, if you'd like to learn more about this, please do attend the event. It's being held in central London on the 10th of October. It just remains for me to say thank you very much, Matt, for sharing those thoughts.
Thank you.